Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and welcome back to one final visit to outer space as we take a look at the end of my game of Xayah Legends of a Drift System, and I will discuss some of my final thoughts, which really can be summed up in one simple phrase. I absolutely love this game. It has such a unique feel. Maybe the closest approximation would be if you combine some of the elements from Hexplorit and Runebound into a science fiction setting. That might give you a close approximation of some of the ways that this game makes me feel, but overall I just love it. And one of the reasons why I do love it so much is it reminds me of two of my favorite things from when I was younger, probably like around junior high and high school days. And those two things are Crusher Joe, the OVA series and the movie, and of course Dirty Pair. So this is from my favorite era of Japanese animation. Mid to late 80s, early 90s, straight to video style animation. I just absolutely love this era of the art and the stories. Both of these were created by the same gentleman, Haruka Takachiho, and I believe they both started out as Japanese science fiction novels. But just reading the back of this one here, so this is the OVA series. This is a 2-episode series, but this says icy asteroids slamming into planets and bioweapon infested worlds, all in a day's work for a crusher. In the 22nd century, mankind has expanded into outer space. However, it was the Crushers who paved the way, performing jobs that range from terraforming to asteroid busting, warp lane plotting to transportation. These days, the Crushers still accept jobs of all kinds, so as long as they are legal and ethical, the Crusher Joe's team is the best in the business. And this has a little description of one of the episodes in here. Of course, no job goes as expected. Whether it's rescuing prisoners trapped on an icy asteroid in a decaying orbit. I mean, that is totally something that you would do in Xayah here. Just a fantastic collection of episodes. I highly recommend Crusher Joe if you haven't seen it yet. The movie also is super great, just awesome character designs and great space opera. And then of course you have Dirty Pair also, the sexy ladies, and they are also like mercenaries. They take on missions and they go into outer space, and kind of another no good deed goes unpunished style of story. But there's one episode in here in particular where they have to go to a prison planet and take care of some bad dudes, and that also reminds me a lot of Xayah. And so I really do get that feeling of the anime that I like. So even though I read a lot of science fiction, I don't read a ton of space opera. I know that space opera has enjoyed popularity throughout all of the years, and in the last 10 or so years, it's enjoyed a great deal of popularity with authors like Peter F. Hamilton and Alistair Reynolds. I've only read a couple of books from those guys, and while I think they're okay, they're a little long for their subject matter for me. But I know people really like those guys a lot. One series that I do want to read, and it's actually a new series. I don't read a lot of new fiction. A lot of my fiction I read is old, but I read about this and it comes highly recommended. And this is the first part of, I believe it's a trilogy by Becky Chambers. And the first book is called The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And this says, when Rosemary Harper joins the crew of the Wayfarer, she isn't expecting much. The Wayfarer, a patched-up ship that's seen better days, offers her everything she could possibly want. A small, quiet spot to call home for a while, adventures in far-off corners of the galaxy, and distance from her troubled past. But Rosemary gets more than she bargained for with the Wayfarer. The crew is a mismatch of species and personalities, from Sissix, the friendly reptilian pilot, to Kizzy and Jinx, the constantly sparring engineers who keep the ship running. Life on board is chaotic, but more or less peaceful, exactly what Rosemary wants. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's going to be a while, but if you have read this, let me know, because I've heard nothing but good things about it. Another kind of spacefaring space opera that I really like a lot is the second part, Beyond the Blue Event Horizon by Frederick Pohl, the first part being Gateway. A really great example of this kind of, I've seen in Xia, this kind of like blue collar space opera where you have miners and it's kind of like space truckers. If you guys know of any more examples of stuff like that, let me know, because I really like reading things like that. And moving back to the anime connection with the manga, you have this fantastic manga from Makoto Yukimura, and that is called Planets. And this is volume 1. I also have volume 2, but this is a really fantastic space opera manga that is really kind of hard science fiction. It's really about space travel and living in space and the kind of stress of being in space. And it has some absolutely fantastic art and tense moments. Really great if you like your science fiction, really science-y. Highly recommend those. And then of course, I think I've shown these before, but whenever I see these covers, I think of Xia. These covers just scream classic science fiction with their super clean art. And a really nice collection. Not everything in here is space opera. Some of it is more terrestrial based science fiction. That's usually the kind of stuff I prefer to read. But I just thought I would show these covers again just because I love them so much. But yeah, if you guys know of any really, really great space opera, let me know, because I would be interested in reading some in the coming years. But so I ended up, as I started the game with piloting the Ghost Stalker, I upgraded to the Crimbler. And here you can see my final outfit as I was approaching the end game, as I was approaching getting 10 fame points here. But I still had my cargo pod. I upgraded my engine to a D8 to the Halon engine. I kept one of the +2 GTS modifiers that I had. I kept my D6 charge shield, but I added this Enviro shield, this mod that also comes with the expansion. And what that does is it allows you to, any damage you take from any non-combat damage, it allows you to defend against all of it. Really handy, especially in the way that I was playing for most of this game, which was non-combative, more of a peaceful kind of trader or salvager mode, and that came in handy. And then I also just picked up these blasters here. These, what does that say? The knock blaster, the least powerful of the blasters at D6, and I also picked up this piercer, which gives me it pierces through 4 points of defense if I use it there. And the reason I did that is because I have these spice cubes that I need to get rid of. I need to unload. I bought some from Kemplar 2 here. And unfortunately, I have not found the planet yet that buys spice. However, I did discover Loathe, and Loathe is like the outlaw planet. Here we have Loathe here. Let's read a little bit about Loathe. Loathe is from the base game. Turn to our handy dandy lore guide. Loathe, let's see here. Centuries ago, Loathe was a prison planet. Prison planet, dirty pair connection there, at least in my mind. Criminals were left to mine the mineral-rich crust for valuable metals, while guard stations hovered in low orbit, keeping relative peace. These metals were traded for rations, clothing, and precious water, not to mention lining the guards' pockets. The acid air kindly shortened the life sentences of the inmates. However, during the Lesser Rebellion, the prisoners overthrew the orbit guard stations and began setting their own terms. Trade flourished for the much relied upon metals. So what's interesting about loath is loath you can sell any amount or any type of trade good. However, what happens is loath only consumes. They don't produce. So when you sell something to loath, nothing new is produced on the economy board. It's just used up, and that's a really cool little thematic element of loath. But on loath, we have the scoundrel NPC. And he came out as the usual suspect, and he targets the player if I am innocent. Okay, and right now I'm innocent because I have not done any outlaw stuff in the game. So I decided to add those blasters, and I want to fly into loath to sell my spice so I can get 4,000 credits. And I want to try to get 5,000 credits so I can buy a point of fame to bring me up to 9. That way I only need 1 more point of fame, and I should be able to get it by pretty easily eventually by selling some more goods. So as soon as my ship crosses the planetary shield system onto loath, I instantly become an outlaw. You know, they figure that if you are crossing this outlaw planet, you are up to some smuggling or something, some counterfeiting, something no good. And so I'm going to become an outlaw. If I could become an outlaw, then the scoundrel will not target me. So I have to choose sides here, because over here, actually he was at Kemplar 2, is the enforcer. And this is kind of like the galactic cops. The galactic cops in this game are corrupt. They target the player if an outlaw, but they can be paid off or they can be fought off. Well, as soon as I cross this planetary shield here, I'm going to become an outlaw, and this enforcer is going to be coming after me. And so I needed those blasters in order to defend myself against the Kemplar. Best defense is a good offense. So I can hopefully take it out to maybe also get my final point of fame. And then I would become like the Outlaw King or something. Really interesting way that the behaviors of the NPCs do help shape not just the mechanisms of the game, not just the way the game is played, but also they help shape the narrative. And speaking of that, the merchant ship during this game was a real pain in the ass. And the merchant ship flies from each of the major planets. It has a trade route from Dorvan 5 to Azure to Kemplar 2 to Neo Damascus and then to Lunari and back again. And it keeps flying to those planets, landing on its buy spaces. And its behavior was the market manipulator. And anytime it would land on a buy space, it would clear the economy board of that resource. So it was target the buy space on the next route planet, move to that target. If arrived, discard all cargo of that type from the economy board. If nothing is discarded, I would add 4 to the next round's NPC fame point roll. And here is another really interesting part of this game that on paper sounds kind of ridiculous, but in actuality, in practice, I think it's really neat. So you are competing against all of the NPCs to reach your final victory point total before they do. We went over in the last video all of the ways that you have as a player to earn fame points in this game. The NPCs, the way they earn fame points is a roll of the D20. That's it. It's a completely random way that they get points, but it totally works in the game. So depending on what you roll, they are going to get at the end of each round, they are going to get a certain amount of fame points, and they are just going to keep moving up. Depending on if they are far back from you, they're going to add a couple, they're going to add to that total. If they've earned some credits on that turn, they're going to add to their total. If the merchant ship, like we said, has different things that it can do to help the NPCs add to that total. And so it gives you a couple of ways to think about mitigating how much they get to add to their fame point D20 roll. But it also just adds this element of kind of controlled chaos to where sometimes how other players are earning their points is really out of your hand. You can't keep track of everything, and sometimes your opponents are just going to get some points and there's nothing you are going to be able to do about it. So I really like that. It's a very simple way to add a kind of a ticking threat, a somewhat of a timer, but because there's a randomness to it, it doesn't feel like you're just ticking down a track on like a clock or something. Really like that system. I had a couple very lucky rolls when I was rolling for the NPCs where I was rolling like 1s, 2s, and 3s, and they weren't getting any fame points for a couple turns. So it almost always ends up being a pretty close game. So while I was playing, while I was exploring, I did trigger 3 different events. And let's take a look at those. It'll give you some of the ideas of like the different kinds of events that will come out. So the first one was this Galactic Jubilee. It says that all debts are forgiven. While this card is in play, players can travel to the kiln. So you can travel to this NPC, this neutral NPC space station there. And you can receive credits. It's like a one-time gift from the galactic government. And then according to their current position on the fame track. So if you're in first place, you get 1,000 credits, which I was in first place, or I am now. Second place, and then so this is more like if you are playing against other people. But what I would do also is go ahead and add, like look at where the NPCs are and give them that many credits also. So that would allow them to add to their fame point die roll. But really cool. There are quite a few cards and things like this that help people who are losing catch up a little bit. There's a couple rubber banding type catch-up mechanisms in the game to keep things exciting. We also have this thing here called the Socialist Merchants, helping captains in need. While this card is in play, players may not purchase more than 1 fame point per turn. So you can't just buy all of your fame points. You can never buy your final fame point, but you can buy multiples on a turn, usually, except for this. Then at the start of your turn, take a gift and rearm markers if needed. And this really only helps if you are behind the leader. Another way to catch up. And then finally, we had this thing called Retethered. And that was this Tigress gate, which is the gate that I said is like disconnected from the other gates, which I'd never found. But this card allows that Tigress gate to be connected to the other gates, giving you fast travel. But overall, I was really pleased with the way this game was played. I had a ton of fun. I love just the way the map gets set up as you're playing. The solo game has a nice mechanism to where even if you don't explore as a player, even if you don't explore a new sector, one is added every single round to kind of simulate other players being on the board doing their thing. And of course, we have the star Zaya, the main star of this drift system, came out. And I don't care how many times I draw this tile out from the stack of tiles, every time it feels like a big deal. I mean, this tile just looks so awesome, and it's such in stark contrast to the rest of the board. It's bright, blazing, sunspot littered surface here, and yeah, I just love placing that tile. It always feels like you're really adding something substantial to the board. I didn't find some of the major planets. I didn't find some of the major anomalies. I did have quite a hard time completing missions during this game because I just wasn't finding the planets that I needed to find or the sectors that I needed to find. And there are so many that I didn't even go through. The board can get absolutely massive. I did find most of the major trade planets, but I didn't find any of the other really kind of odd stuff. So no asteroids came out. I only found one nebula. I had one mission for a long time where I had to get into a nebula inside one of these pink bordered tiles, but I just now drew one, and so that mission did absolutely nothing for me for the game. And all in all, there's that Tigress Gate. All in all, I had a really hard time completing any kinds of missions on this game. And that happens sometimes because the missions are random and you have to go to random places, and sometimes those spaces just don't come out onto the map. Especially since I was only playing to 10 points, which is a pretty quick game. You don't have a lot of time to sit and waste and just explore, hoping to find what you're looking for. You kind of have to dig in pretty quickly to decide how you're going to go for your victory. But yes, this was Xayah. I was super happy to get this game out again. It does take some time because, like I said, there are a lot of rules. The game starts off pretty simple when the system is small and you don't have a lot of NPCs out. But as the game starts playing and as you start adding things, a lot of the tiles keep adding little mechanisms. There are quite a few things to remember. I probably have never played this game 100% correctly. It is one of those where I'm always like, oh yeah, you got to do this. Oh, I need to remember this. But it probably balances out in my favor and in the game's favor, equally. One thing I will say is I really don't think I can recommend the game without the expansion. It is the Embers of a Forsaken Star. It truly is a must-have expansion. It's an essential part of the game, I believe. And I'm really hoping that when this game comes back into print that, well, one, at least everything comes back into print at the same time. But two, I really hope that they decide to just bundle everything together into a new deluxe box, because so many of the things, I went back and I was watching that second video that I made, and over and over again I was like, oh, this part is cool, it's from the expansion. This is cool, it's from the expansion. I seem to say that a lot, especially when playing with this solo variant. The expansion is essential, and the expansion, for being a pretty small box, adds an absolute ton to the game. One final thing I did want to mention, and I didn't use them in this game, I was going to, but playing a shorter game, I just didn't have enough time. There are 2 NPCs that I downloaded from Board Game Geek. And that is the Crux, which is this ice comet space station, and this kind of a space giant space squid thing called the Jotun. And each one of those has their own behavior charts, and they add another thing to the game. I use this Cthulhu looking dude to represent the Jotun, and I use one of the little drones to represent the Crux. So you can use whatever you want, but there are a lot of things like that out on the internet and at Board Game Geek to add to the game that fans have created. So you should take a look and see if any of that stuff interests you. But yeah, that is, I believe, my final thoughts for Xayah Legends of the Drift System with the expansion. It is just a fantastic game, especially if you have a fondness for old space opera anime. It completely gives me that feel of the Leiji Matsumoto cartoons, Star Blazers, or Space Battle Cruiser Yamamoto. My mind just blanked on that. Captain Harlock, Arcadia of my youth. Gundam, especially War in the Pocket or Charged Counterattack. That era of space opera anime is completely captured here. Even stuff like Cowboy Bebop or something. It would be pretty cool to get a complete reskin of this game, all in an old 80s hand-drawn anime style. That might be a little bit too nerdy for a lot of people, but I would definitely appreciate that. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this 3-part series on Xayah Legends of a Drift System. This was the first game voted on by the members of the Dungeon Dive Patreon. So thank you guys for voting for this game. they had an option of Zaya, Relic, or Advanced Space Crusade. And Zaya won. I will be taking a look at the other two. I'm glad this game won because I always enjoy getting it to the table. And if you appreciate what I do, please check out the Patreon. You can join at $3 a month or $5 a month, and we're building a nice little community there. We're going to have our first kind of meet and greet coming up in a couple weeks, where I'm just going to post a link to a Google chat, a Gmail chat, and we're just going to sit and have some drinks and talk about maybe some holiday traditions or some games and that kind of thing. So, all right, you guys, well, take it easy, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.